President of Education. This is my 3rd year in the ICC, and I'm currently living at Vale House.
I'm Richard Larry. I was at Owen from 62 to 64, pre-Vietnam War era, I guess. And I still keep in touch with a number of the guys, including him.
Oh, hi, my name is Judy, Judy Smale, and I was at Owen also, but obviously before it became a men's co-op. I was there in 51, and 51 and 52, probably 3 years. And we boarded, we had men boarders, but it was strictly, in those days, segregated by gender, as all the co-ops were, I guess.
Yeah.
What year did they become co-ed, or did they become co-ed gradually, or whatever?
Nakamura was the first, and I believe that was in 68.
Oh.
We'll probably see that in the film here. It was when they lowered the age of adulthood.
Ah, I see.
But the- also,
Well, the voting came in for 18-year-olds.
yeah, right. Well, remember the argument was, if you're old enough to die, you don't have to vote.
Yeah, that was, I remember that.
Yeah.
Joe?
I get the
Joe?
I'm Joan Buckley, and I lived at what we called Mark 8 because it was the 8th house, and it was over on South Forest, 1917 South Forest. And there were only 8 members when we opened up, and we had when we elected officers. I was elected the house director, which later I decided was because I was the youngest member there, so they had me do that. But all we had to do was lock the door because they were all old enough to be graduate students. And Luther and I dated for 5 years before we got married, but I knew him all that time. And I'm a librarian.
Hi, I'm Kitty Morlock. I lived at Vale from 1962 to 1965. At that time during the summers, Mish came over and boarded at Vale. So we really had quite just a networking with Mish. And also we had a lot of boarders in the neighborhood who were living in rooming houses. Large kitchen activity. Lots of interesting and fun experiences.
Good afternoon, I'm Dan Kruger, and I lived in the co-ops from 2001 to 2006 in O'Keefe, Black Elk, and King House.
I'm Jessica. I never lived in the co-op.
But I live with Dan, and he's here, so.
Hi, I'm Anjanette Bunce, and cameras.
That's right, don't worry.
And I lived at Luther, and Roots, and Linder for a summer, and then Black Elk. And I lived in the co-ops from 95 to 99.
Okay, now I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do. The camera, let's see, no, I'm Charles Judson, as you can very well see. And I was at Xanadu, Fort Xanadu, Kublai and Pleasure Dome, I suppose. And we were famous for a number of things, apparently for parties. I didn't realize we were that famous for parties. But we did have some excellent and actually rather educational ones because we had especially the train group, the sort of train spotter group. But at any rate, I also lived in Renaissance House on the North Campus. I don't know what it's called now. I guess it's still Renaissance? Yeah, okay. And that was an interesting experience because I also met somebody from Austin, Texas, which is where I live outside of, to the east, an organic farm and all that. We all feel, I guess, a lot of people feel responsible for the world. So I guess I'm one of those people that feels like, you're supposed to do something good in the world. And I guess it's a co-op thing, And so there's many things I could say, but I could go on and on. But anybody from Xanadu, who wants to talk to me about Xanadu, please do, because, I need my memory jogged a little bit more.
What years was it?
I was in the 70s, and, it was a very interesting place. Of course, now I can still see the building. And I think it's very appropriate that I went to a fraternity. I think it's great because it started out as a sorority, and it was a Zen place, like a monastery or whatever. They never changed it from the previous one, and they went. He'll tell you more about Xanadu probably, but my experience in the co-ops was really great. Compared to when I stayed in the dorms at Berkeley. And it was a very different experience. So I think co-ops really, are the best. Even though, it's like young students, they don't have an experience. They come from another society, that doesn't have a lot of cooperative stuff. But, you learn how to, respect each other and help each other out in in what you're doing in life, so.
I'm just gonna add something.
Yeah.
At Owen House, we had problems with cooperation in the sense that some people were very, very responsible and would take it upon themselves to keep the house clean, maintain it, and others we had to keep after them because they didn't want to do their jobs. But we came together one time. We invited the Dean of Women for dinner, a Sunday dinner, because we knew she didn't like us. She thought we were a hotbed of radicalism, and that we didn't keep ours, that our house mother was not conscientious and did not lock the door when she was supposed to, which I think was 10:30 during the week. And so Dean Bacon, we decided we would invite her and show her that we were just everyday, normal people.
Everyday normal.
So Dean Bacon came and
Okay.
we cleaned the house. It was amazing. We cleaned the house and we had a wonderful dinner. I can't remember what we had, but we thought she would really be impressed, but the feeling was after she left, we decided that she really was not impressed. She didn't change her mind at all. So we never tried that again.
Yeah.
I'm Bob Ensler.
Take the state road exit.
I lived in Owen House for 3 years from 62 to
Go down
65.
State to Hill and then
From-
to the.
And I was here in 60 also when John Kennedy was a candidate.
Right across.
You celebrated that 50th year 2 years ago. But I was on the steps of the Michigan Union that night. Because I lived in South Quad before, and we heard that a presidential candidate was going to come and speak. That normally I had kept very regular hours, unusual for students, but I didn't. And it was supposed to be about 11 o'clock, and it was 2 in the morning, and so we waited out, and it was a cool night also, I remember. But anyway, that was just one of the experiences. I went into the co-ops because it was the most inexpensive place to room, and I liked it very much. I became the treasurer the second year I was there, then the president of Owen House the third year. And I got to know Luther quite well, and Joan, I knew you a little bit too, and your daughter, because we went to the same church here. So I saw Luther in the church I went to as, on Washtenaw, I think it is.
No.
Down
Well, it used to be.
UU Church.
Yeah, now that's a B&B.
Oh, is that right? Oh, did they
Oh,
move
yeah,
it?
that's right.
Moved to that place?
What's better use for you?
I talked to her. Oh, yeah, bed and breakfast.
Anyway, so
It's not.
I went to,
High price, very high.
I went into the Peace Corps partly because of my co-op experience. After being a co-op for 3 years, I knew that the Peace Corps wouldn't be a whole lot different. and it was a very good experience. I was in Ethiopia for 2 years. Then I came back to more graduate school, and finally I decided to become a high school teacher by choice. I had originally intended to be an instructor, but I wanted to be in a community college. But with all the interaction with people, I found out I liked the high school kids best because they really are demanding and it's real busy every minute of the day. So for 30 years I taught at the same high school.
Did you say 30?
30 years. I taught 36 years, but 30 years at Arthur Hill High School, where I was also a student. And when I left Saginaw, Michigan in '60 to come here to Ann Arbor, I thought I would never go back to Saginaw again, because it seemed pretty rural. But nonetheless, I did go back because it was a quieter place, and I had 3 daughters, and 2 of them went here, and one was a co-op member here also at Vale House. So now she's a doctoral candidate at the University of Maryland. So we have a long tradition at Michigan.
Okay, my name's Fritz Paper. I was in Vale Co-op from 1979 to 1985. I'm actually, the person that keeps calling me is also from Vale. She's on the way here from Detroit and keeps getting on. Kate O'Leary is her name. I was president of Vale for one of those years. And we had a lot of fun in Vale in those times.
Shortly after things went good, actually.
Yeah.
I'm Jim Jones. I moved in the same year these guys did to Owen. I moved into Mish House in 1962. 62, 63. Then I was out for a while, came back into the co-ops in 66, 67. Actually at Jones' old co-op, Mark 8, which would then was part of Tri-House, joined in with Pickerel on the other side of the addition. Now called Baker, if anybody's found that. And I lived there for a while, went out into the Peace Corps. And when I came back, I went to Michigan State for graduate work, got into the co-ops there, started working for the co-ops there. And after 3 years, I went down and worked for the co-ops in Austin, Texas for 8 years, and then came back up, worked for the national organization, ASCO, for a couple of years, then took Luther's job when he retired, and I worked there for 15 years, and went back to NASCO and worked with Anjanette and other people for a number of years after that, till '99, and technically I retired in when was it, 2010, the end of 2010, and I'm still very active in things. My son Travis was a member of several co-ops here and was president of the ICC for a while. And my other son is the one that did the direction on this film we're going to see, and is starting a co-op in Grand Rapids as we speak. Wow. So it's something that gets into the blood, as Joan, I think, can attest to. It's something that is always inspirational, regardless of whether you stay involved over time. And it's been an amazing ride for me.
Will this film ever be like, how will it be available? Would we?
You have to ask Susan about that, I think, who's in the other room currently, but you could ask her after.
Could you buy DVDs or get it on YouTube?
It'll probably...
Or downloads?
I'm speaking out of school, but I think that probably it'll be on the web and also available.
Oh, that'd be excellent.
Hi, I'm Eric Lipson. I'm the current general manager. And I've been in this position now for 5.5 years. And the only cooperative experience I had before this was in a landowning cooperative in Canada. A bunch of us hippies in the 70s bought during the war in Vietnam, in the late 60s, bought a piece of land in Canada, thought that would be a good idea, and we still own that today after 40 years. It's now a nature conservancy. We own 3/4 of a mile from Bruce Peninsula, Georgia, on Georgian Bay. So I've always seen the power of cooperatives, no single individual could have done that. And just as no single individual could have built the cooperative that I'm now the general manager of. As Jim said, it really is amazingly inspirational. This is the international year of the co-op, and cooperatives as an alternative model to the standard business, the corporate model, is turning out to be something which is an inspiration for the whole world. The only bright spot in the Spanish economy is Madrigal, and there are co-ops, worker co-ops, and co-ops all over the world which support democracy and democratic decision-making, and it's something which the whole world should aspire to. So I'm really honored to be here with all of you and to be part of this great movement. Thanks for coming.
Newcomer.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm dragging in late. I'm John Gorley. I lived in Tri-House for 2 years, 69 to 71, in Pickerel specifically. And I was the maintenance manager there, and I was on the ICC Board of Directors for a while, right at the time when we got the first check for the North Campus Co-op, which was quite an experience. And I've been involved in co-ops on and off continuously since then, mostly food co-ops. I started a couple of food co-ops as I moved from one place to another. I'm on the board of directors of a nonprofit, west of here in Chelsea right now, Tradition Friends Center, which is a kind of a retreat house sort of for other nonprofits to use when they need it. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Baker House looks like now. It's been a long time.
There's some pizza out there if you're still hungry.
It's on the counter.
Oh, okay, thanks.
And Jeremiah, who are you?
Oh, I'm the guy running the camera. Jeremiah lived at Ruth's from 2008 to 2011. Was VP of EdCom from 29 to 2010, and then ICC president the following year.
Following year and a half, we recruited him for another half year.
Yeah, that's true.
What I'd like to do here before we see the film, I've discovered over time the most interesting thing when people get together and talk about co-ops is the stories and the memories that they have. And I'd like to see if we could go sort of chronologically. We've got people here from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and things have changed so much. I know the story about the North Campus happening, and that whole period in there was like a turning point in the ICC when you were here. But I think that everybody has something that, and some people have already started to do that, sharing. I wonder if we could just do that as a way of talking about the co-ops and seeing what we all have in common, and then go to see the film. Does that sound okay? It might take a little while, is that okay? Joan, what was your favorite memory from back in your days with the co-ops? What happened during that time that was really significant? Yeah.
I was going to tell some funny things about Mark 8. When it came, the Mark 8, the house over there was not ready for occupancy. And the university would not accept to let students live there. So the 8 of us were spread out among different co-ops, and some of us lived at Stevens in the living room, and we slept on the floor for about, I think it was 4 or 5 weeks. And some lived over at Lester House, which was pretty small really, but they took us in. And we all ate at different co-ops, so we were boarded out to eat. But we were just, so frustrated because we couldn't live there and we couldn't do anything. So they said that why don't you clean out the coal in the area and then you'll have a place to put your suitcases. So we enthusiastically went in there, cleaned it up, and then we could store our trunks and our suitcases someplace. But when we opened up, the back end was still not finished, and the windows were still not in the dining room and the kitchen. And so I would lock the front door, but the back of the co-op was wide open. And we didn't eat there until Christmas time. We still couldn't use the kitchen, so it was quite an experience. And my parents came and they brought me, they said, oh, you'll be just fine, this is a nice big house, and they left straight away. They figured out we quickly going back with it, but that was, it was interesting, and we had lots of people from Swarthmore came into the co-op. You know where that is? It's over, it's out west, and it's a very kind of liberal college, and the kids were, they were good workers and they were good co-opers, but some of them didn't ever go to class, they just went to the final exam. So it didn't matter. It was all experience for me. I came from a small college in Iowa, so this was a whole different place.
Do you want to share some more from your memory?
Oh, well, let's see. I just remember that we were a very independent bunch, and kind of a way, we were ahead of our time, maybe 20 years ahead of our time, because the women's liberation movement really didn't get started until the late 60s and 70s. But we never defined it in any sense at all. But we chafed at the regulations that meant we, as women, had to be home by 10:30, whereas the men had no regulations and they could stay out as late as they wanted. It was a very protectionist kind of.
What year was that? What year was that?
51.
Really? It's lasted till that?
Oh, yeah.
That's like 19th
And
century
later,
or something.
until the 60s, I think.
Really?
But our crowning moment
Wow,
was,
all right.
the crowning thing about all that was that once we decided that we would try to go in the front door of the Michigan Union, because at that point, women had to use the side entrance. And I had a job as a waitress at the Michigan Union, and I wanted to go in the front door, but we all felt it was unfair. Why did we have to walk around to the side? So 5 or 6 of us, one day, decided that we would go ahead and see what would happen if we just walked along the sidewalk and then turned right into the Michigan Union. So we did it, and we were so nervous, it was incredible. It was like, I suppose, the sit-ins in the South, right? Same
Really?
idea. And we felt, but we did it, and people kind of stopped and looked at us, because everybody knew at that time in Ann Arbor, but this is something you did not do. It was an unspoken custom. We went in, we walked around, and then we thought, what do we do next?
Now, how do we make a statement?
Yeah, but nobody really
Nobody's.
paid any attention. We just turned around and walked back out.
Sometimes it's just a matter of going to the door.
And then we just breathed a sigh of relief and went back to the co-op. And that was really the end of it at that time, because we never continued doing it. No, it was just over. It was only a single act, but at the time, it seemed very significant.
Well, they were smart not to make, I guess it was smart on the authorities' part not to make a big deal out of it, because obviously.
Well, it was not a written rule anyway, it was just an unspoken custom. You know, like the golf clubs that kept women out, because women played more slowly and held up the men, which is probably true.
Well, like the men should slow down then. What's the problem?
I think you two are the only ones here from the 50s, is that right?
Maybe.
We've got a bunch of people here from the early 60s, which was culturally somewhat similar. Who'd like to talk about what?
This was before the 60s began. 60s really began in 1965. Remember Mary Samuel?
Yeah.
And
Tom Hayden, I think.
Tom, he was the editor. Yeah, he was the editor.
Yeah, I read his articles were excellent.
Yeah.
He's still around in California. I wish his thinking was as good now as it was then.
Yeah, very conservative.
Yeah.
We did not have the social ferment here that you had in the late 30s. And then with obviously from 66 on, there's a lot of a problem here. And so we were in halcyon time, I guess you'd call it. But most we had to worry about was getting good grades.
We had, our old house was one of the, was the top academic grade point GPA of all colleges.
Yeah.
Including the fraternity.
Well, I, for example, was in honors college all 4 years.
Yeah.
And so was Roger, and I mean, a number of people went on to get PhDs and
I always thought that during the 60s, I mean, we had, I mean, of course, Berkeley, I always thought of them as a bit more lunatic over there on the West Coast. I always thought the Midwest was, the activists and stuff were much more practical, you know, much more sustainable.
We did have sit-ins, but our sit-ins were discussions of the war.
Yeah.
We had a group called Youth Committed to War Responsibility, and we did have a couple of groups by 63 that were on campus, and it was starting, but it was discussions. The sit-ins were discussion groups on this movement towards the Vietnam War, basically. And then the civil rights came along in our graduate year, so that was cool. What I was going to say, what I remember is how wonderful it was to have international students in our co-op. And it struck home very recently. We had a Sikh student, S-I-K-H student among our Yogendar Dylan, I remember his name. A young man that was in our co-op, and very nice, and he was very shy at first. But being in a co-op, he didn't stay shy too long, and a lot of discussion. And finally, he left. He cut his hair. That you know about Sikhs, they don't, in their religion, they don't cut their hair, and they have it up in a roll on the top. And why it came home to me is when this Wisconsin incident this summer, where someone went in and shot some of the Sikh temple. And that just was like a stab in my own heart, because I remembered that friend of mine.
he was actually a roommate.
Yogi, we used to call him.
Yeah.
And we had other students from India also in our co-op and from other places. And it made me, we had a good program in the Michigan Union for you could be a brother to somebody from abroad. And so I joined that program partly because of the co-ops and knowing foreign students and wanting to know more. It was a real inspiration to me.
I think it made many of us, the co-op experience, because we always had many different people, it made us more globally aware,
Yes.
you know, more globalists, and maybe a little bit more comfortable with different cultures in the world. You know,
Yes.
you went to Ethiopia, you
Yes.
know, worked there, and, you know, I mean, that's really special, you know, to be able to
That's right.
just go to another place and not realize that there's barriers in the world.
Right.
That, you know, you know, back in those days, we were told about, you know, the Iron Curtain and all that sort of stuff, remember, you know. And it was always funny to me because people were here from behind the Iron Curtain, you know, and also, you know, people would travel to the other side of the Iron Curtain all the time, and it was not really a barrier, you know, so.
Kitty?
Yes, I also was in Vail from 63 to 65, the summer of 62. And I found that people came at that time for many different reasons, I guess as always. I mean, some people were there to work their way through school, some because they wanted a more informal setting, but many because they did want to get away from women's rules and the curfews. So there was, it's kind of the changeover by 1965 or so, women had many of the rights as men, you know, to govern their own lives in terms of when they were in India. It was, I think that Vail at that time, one of the 9 co-op houses, I believe at that time, or maybe 5 women's houses, but with lots of boarders. There were a lot of male graduate students that lived on Lawrence and Kingsley, and some women too, but mainly we had men boarders, and with a combination with Mish, which we kind of over the year kept connected. We was really kind of a nerve center for the SNCC move student,
Yes.
nonviolent
Oh,
coordinating
yes.
committee,
Yeah.
and for peace activism during that time. So when I was first at Vail, I was put in a room with somebody else who had been there before, and I was a peace activist and civil rights supporter, but she felt we all had to sit in at City Hall overnight, several nights, so we would be arrested because we had to get it in the newspaper, because that was the way to change things.
Yeah, right.
And I thought I had to study, I could not cram. And I thought, should I or shouldn't I? She was very convincing. I decided I needed to study, so I sat in until 9 or 10, did not stay overnight, and she ended up going into the Peace Corps or to Africa. So I think a lot of people who were very, very active might have taken some time off, like she did. We had a house dog. We had a house dog. Somebody in our co-op decided to adopt a dog, she and her roommate. And at Vail, I think they don't allow them that. I don't know, some houses do. But the house dog would often show up in the Nichols Arcade when we were walking to class, or at Angel Hall. His name was Milton. And he would come to house meetings. Mish House had a porch swing and probably still does. It's just such a, I love that house. There's something about it, even though I like Vail too. But I think the Vail women were envious of Mish that they had the swing, because we had kind of a sprawling basement. We had lots of porches, but that swing was great. It needed painting. So one night after a party at Mish during the summer, we sneaked over to Mish and stole the swing, took it to Vail, put it on one of the balconies and painted it. We didn't say a word. When the Mish men, what happened to our swing? And I think they had been playing our tricks on us, so I think we said, you can dish it out, but can you take it? Summer going swimming in the Huron River, somebody had a car at Mish, a VW Beetle, and he was a pianist and conservative guy in many ways, but he loved the co-op. He wanted to also live on a budget. And Morris Risenberg.
Oh, no, okay.
Yes.
The most famous of all.
So he would be practicing till midnight at these parties, and he would come to the party, and then we'd all pile in his VW, those who felt they wanted to take the risk to swim in the Huron River, even though we knew it was polluted. At that time, I think it wasn't as polluted. We had a midnight swim when we kind of were risk takers. And the Kennedy administration, and of course, I remember being in my room and I heard on the radio that Kennedy had been ambushed. And then I went to choir, I sang in a choir at Angel Hall, and Maynard Klein, our director, decided to dismiss it. We were singing the War Requiem by Britain, and he said, this is a fitting piece, beautiful contemporary. But he said, but we were huddled in the living room there. We had a TV downstairs at Vail, black and white, that was available. And we read the paper and listened to the radio, and there was just really a lot of emotion. So just a lot of, without electronics and the technology, there was a lot of social, just kind of direct, real gathering in that main area downstairs and in the living room. And I think probably maybe more social gathering. I don't know, because I know now we all have more relationships with our computer now. So
No.
I don't know what things are like, but that was, to me, it made a huge impact on my life, the co-ops. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
What was your last year? What was your last year here? In co-op.
Co-ops finished in '65, and then 4 of us got a house together on Thayer Street.
Oh.
And we ran that.
You were able to live together after the co-op.
$5 per person for groceries every week. And then we might get our own snack food. There was a lot of hamburger and old chicken and the wings and the skin. And we weren't as vegetarian then in the co-ops, but it really was a great model for living and sharing.
You guys were important to me later when I was in high school here too, starting in 68 or 69, I can't remember now, but all the way through 72. And I was involved, just in high school. Being in high school here is different. I was also an anti-war activist, environmental action, and other kinds of things, civil rights activities and things like that. So it was interesting because everybody at the university, including in the co-ops, was important to us in the high schools as a resource, for learning in the community and all. So I really learned more from the living in Ann Arbor than I really learned in high school, although I had an excellent high school. But it was, so you guys are important. So
For people, it was such an exciting time.
it really was.
On the other hand, when we lived it was very on edge.
Yeah.
Even missile crisis
Oh,
for
yes,
us.
always.
Those of us
Yes.
were there at the time.
Yeah.
And others in the 1970s, they said, oh, but it was so exciting.
And the assassinations too, before, Martin Luther King and, Robert Kennedy.
But every era has its...
But in the 50s also, the Un-American Activities Committee.
Oh, yes.
Oh, that was great.
Oh, yeah, especially for a year.
Polarizing.
Oh, yeah.
Especially since the name of the original house is what, the Socialist, Michigan Socialist House? I know. Oh, my
And there were
God.
some co-opers who had to appear, who were called to appear before the Un-American Activities Committee.
Did they
When
survive?
they were investigating communism sympathizers throughout the whole country. They came to Lansing, they went to state capitals, and there were 3 guys from the U of M, professors, who were expelled from the university, and they could never teach again in the United States. And my brother was also called before the committee. But the odd thing is that he was in Russia at the time. So they said, see, that proves
See,
it.
that
He
proves
was
it.
not- But he was actually there to accept an international mathematics medal called the Field Award.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's
it was
an
kind of
important one.
embarrassing to the committee to find out that
That he was actually,
they wanted to cut off his funds because he was getting funds from the National Science Foundation to administer to math students, his graduates, but nothing ever came of it.
Thank goodness for
Never
that.
bothered them again.
Well, it was just politics, a big show,
Yeah.
and some people really had serious problems, and other times, it all depends on the show.
But the strange thing is that years later, we found out that the state of Michigan had been keeping rec files on all of the people who were students, especially at U of M, who were active in any way, periphery kinds of activities. We would attend the Paul Robeson
I must have been on the
concert in Detroit. And I found
I
out later
know.
what we could send for our files. There it was.
Hoover.
And then we had agents who had infiltrated the co-ops. FBI agents to keep tabs on our political
But that was-
activities.
and that was
we saw
also-
their names crossed out in our file. But
That
we
was-
knew who they were by that
Well,
time.
that was also when we learned about agent of provocateurs and all that sort of stuff, because there are always these guys that's like, oh, why don't we go blow it up, or go do something violent and break some windows or something like that. And you always knew that those are the guys working for the,
Yeah, you kind of.
trying to set you up like Hoover or something. But
Were there some other people that came in after Kitty in the late 60s? I can't remember.
I'm 69 to 71.
Let me say just one word before you. I was right in the middle there then. I was 66, 67. I lived in Tri-House. I built the pond. I think that was really the turning point, and somebody else mentioned this, was 65. That was really when there was sort of a demographic change in the student life, to the point where the baby boom generation kind of took over, and there was a cultural shift at that point. And living at Tri-House at that time was very different from living in Mish House in the early 60s. And a lot of activity was going on, and it was much more overt. I think the biggest thing that I remember that a number of people from the co-ops were involved with was a huge sit-in over in the administration building at that time regarding the student rights, actually. that time, because there was a whole series of things. Everybody was protesting everything. You know, there was everything from civil rights to the Vietnam War to whatever, but this happened to focus on student rights and freedom of speech.
Wow, we need that now.
And I remember it because it was massive. People were there. 2 in the morning, the university caved in and called a special meeting of anybody who was interested at Angel Hall. Not Angel Hall, I'm sorry, Hill Auditorium. They opened the Hill Auditorium at 2 in the morning. And they ended up setting up a committee. Of course, we weren't sophisticated enough then to know that when you set up a committee, that's the kiss of death. That's right. They had some faculty members who the students respected, and that was a mistake too.
We'll joke about a camel.
Yeah.
Horse design with you.
But I just remember very clearly how everybody was so involved in all of that protest activity, as well as in the cultural changes like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, basically. And that it was so different from the earlier times. But you probably have some additional things you want to add on to that.
Things were changing really fast, and we were very much aware of being in the middle of a really important time. It's hard. You know, you're talking about exciting. It's hard to describe now. It's hard to look back and realize how much happened. You know, I started at U of M in '67 and I finished my undergrad work in '71. And it felt to me during those 4 years that everything had changed. That the world, it was a whole new world. When I was in high school, I was convinced that there was going to be a revolution, a violent revolution. I think it happened during those 4 years in college. It wasn't an armed revolution, but it was certainly a social revolution. One of the things that was going on was that the co-ops were growing at a really phenomenal rate, probably
tripled in size.
And so we were seeing new houses sprout up, and those of us who had been involved a little bit were kind of mentoring other new co-opers who had never lived in a co-op before. One of the wonderful things about the co-op that has helped me all the rest of my life was the opportunity to do things for myself or do things for the group that were relevant, that were important. You know, students go to college and the typical experience is that you play at things. You know, you give speeches to a speech class, right? Or you attend a mock convention, a mock political convention. You know, this is what this felt exciting to most students. But in co-ops, we were really running the house. We were running a big corporation, a growing corporation. I don't remember how many houses we had. Something on the order of 15 houses. We were buying houses. I mentioned that a group of us from the board of directors drove to Chicago one day. It took more than a day, but we drove to Chicago to the Housing and Urban Development Office, and we picked up a $300,000 check, which was huge at the time, to make the down payment for construction of the North Campus co-ops. And just you know, kind of an unbelievable thing for somebody who was simply a junior in college. And then, you know, it was real. It wasn't just pretend. It wasn't just college kind of courses practice. You know, we were, you know, it went without saying that we were involved politically also. You know, I got tear gassed in Washington, and I had a curiosity that was maybe a little bit more than I should have had. I don't know if any of you remember the steam tunnels. They've since been closed off.
Oh,
They used to be-
underground.
They closed them off already?
There's brick walls periodically throughout there, so you can't travel. But you used to be able to travel the entire length and breadth of the campus underground to the steam tunnels.
Yeah,
And
Yeah, I remember.
I and a couple of friends mapped the steam tunnels. Of course, the university surely had blueprints, but kind of an underground project. We mapped the steam tunnels, we learned where all the entrances were that were blocked. And I got to a point where I was giving people tours of the steam tunnels.
Charging money?
No, I didn't charge any money. Lo and behold, one of the people that I gave a tour to went back a few weeks later and used that as a way to get into the ROTC building and set off a bomb.
Oh.
And I was very sorry.
Ted Kaczynski was here at that time?
Yeah.
He was here when.
Ted Kaczynski.
The
That was my school. That was my school. Oh, it's probably.
He was a U of M student. then.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he was-
Yeah, that's right. He was also considered the worst.
He was co-op member.
And at Berkeley, he was considered, he was rated by the students as the worst professor they ever had. He was totally and it showed you how little they care about students and education over at Berkeley. Because even though he was the worst they ever had, even after he bombed the university, they still said, well, they wouldn't mind having him back. It's like he could come back at full pay and everything. It's like, oh, okay. Well, okay, it's Berkeley.
So, you want to add any more to that, or is that?
Oh, that's enough.
Oh, there's plenty more, sure.
Yeah, but John and I worked together at Arbortext.
And I didn't realize, at least I don't remember, I didn't remember,
You worked
I
in
didn't
the
know that
Argus
you were a
building.
co-op.
Well, I was probably a little before your time, but I didn't get to
No.
see the steam tunnels.
I'm sorry, you came in late, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kate O'Leary. I lived in first joint house. Probably would have been 1980. When did you move to?
79 was when I moved to Vail. So you were in Vail starting in 78, so you were in joint house before that.
No, I don't know. But
Right.
anyhow, I was in joint house for one semester because I was dating somebody who lived in the co-ops, and I was in North Campus dormitory, Bursley Hall, 4th Rotvig, which was infamous for hosting their own little private hash bash. They used, back then you could drink, of course, at 18, and they had the entertainment budget for parties, but someone had a bright idea to use some of that money to buy some weed.
We'll get up to your period. I was trying to go
Oh, well, it's a good story.
I know.
We're up, is there anybody else in the 60s that I missed? Okay, we're up to the 70s.
Oh, there's me. Oh no, do I have to go on about the 70s? Is there anybody else here in the 70s? Help, help.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of people from the 70s.
Okay,
What's your name?
That's when Tri-House became joint house.
let them go
Right.
first. Yeah, let them all go first. That'll be fine. I think a lot of my experiences are also sort of later 70s, maybe around 76, 77 or something like that. So that would be good. Yeah.
So anybody in the early 70s?
Someone here was last night, Chris Corchin, but she's not here today.
Yeah, we had a couple of other people from Xanadu actually last night who were in
Yes.
there in the early 70s.
Golly, where are they now?
Yeah, well, just,
You can
I
tell
just
about Xanadu.
want to talk a little bit, and this is in the film a lot too, so I won't go on very much, but that period when the co-ops tripled in size was roughly between 1968 when they bought Deb's house, and then they bought Minnie's house, and they built North Campus, bought Lenny Bruce, now called Sojourner Truth House, bought Xanadu, and it went from about 200 people up to about 600. And that's just incredible how that happened. Everything changed in the ICC during that period by about 74. So now we're at a point in all the stories where suddenly the co-ops have become very different in terms not of the individual houses, but in terms of the organization as a whole. And at the same time, things went co-ed, Nakamura was the first one to go co-ed in the late 60s, and Stevens House was the last. And that all happened by the early 70s. So, who's next in the 70s?
Maybe Fritz.
Well, you were in the co-ops before.
No. Actually, no. Maybe, I don't know.
Okay. Well, I moved into Vale House in '79, so right at the end of the '70s.
I guess that makes me the woman.
Oh, so you're
Oh my
Fritz.
gosh,
Yeah.
okay, all right, well.
Older than you thought.
Yeah, I know, okay. Jeez, all right, well, I don't know that I can match anything, although one of the, I have discovered that Xanadu was known for his parties. I never realized that we were like a party house or something.
Halloween parties.
Yes,
Yeah.
actually, yes. Well, and it was, we had some rather interesting, I guess it was the 70s, so you're thinking, it was kind of a fun town. I mean, I guess sort of the sexual revolution and the drug things kind of got ahead of some of the other kinds of, revolutions going on. And so, I mean, of course, we had, the beer kegs. And one of the things I always loved, I came up here on a train from outside of Austin, Texas. And as I was coming up on the train, I was thinking about the guys at Xanadu. There was a group, I only wish, because we were talking about it last night with one of the other Xanaduvians, and there was a group that...
Xanaduvian?
Yeah, the Xanaduvians, and we, there was a group that they were really train fanatics, they were train fans, I guess you call them train spotters these days or something. And they loved to go around and they would take not videos, kind of those days. They would take, film, I think Super 8 or something like that. Yeah, I know, I'm calling it a prank. Really old, but they would take the films and, let's see, here I am. I guess I should put myself on my own video.
Yeah.
Anybody, kind of adjust it if you want to make sure that you're getting me. You can just, say.
You said it here.
Yeah,
And
well, it's kind of hard to get. You might want to go farther back. You might want to go farther back. So we're talking about videos and filming and
Extreme
everything.
close-up. Are you ready for your close-up, Mr.
Yes.
Snell?
All right.
I need a prop.
Well, if you
A
just
box.
tilt it. I think if you did.
Tilt it, okay.
Yeah, if you tilt it back, you don't have to have it so high. Oh, that's good. You see? Got it. All right, well, I'm going to be in my own film here. But, okay. And actually, I came up here because I was hoping I could get a little sort of 70s in the rearview mirror kind of, like people reflecting back on the times and all that. I'm getting lots of stuff. So Xanadu was apparently known for his parties. As I'm told by the Buckleys, the kids somehow suffered through it. I think at one point they used to sit on the stairs and cry, I think, at these parties, and there were a lot of interesting parties. I mean, I think it went farther back to the beginnings of Xanadu. But there were lots of get-togethers apparently before I ever arrived. But and they were fun, but also educational. And we learned lots of things about trains I would have never ever learned. About diesel engines and all sorts of things. And it was fun. It was really enjoyable. I mean, if you did an engineering class like this, you'd never know you were in school. But the train spotting guys, they use the technology of the day. They would have these presentations that involved the use of crystals and mirrors and lasers and things, and they would have multiple images, moving images going through. I mean, from their Super 8 camera. And they would have slides and they would read poetry and there'd be music and there'd be train sounds that they recorded. I mean, these guys are really fanatics about trains. And and it was just, they had these great, and we have a number of other events like that, including the Halloween parties and things like that. and they were all kind of, there was always a kind of great high-level exchange, you know, social, really unique experiences that you couldn't have anywhere else. So we had some really odd things that happened in that time too. I don't know if I should say. We had a thing. It was a little moment of the people. There was some kind of like somebody. I think it was some kind of joke. I mean, really, nothing ever came of it. There was like somebody. They were like slashed clothes in the laundry room. It was around Halloween, so I think maybe there was kind of relationship to that. But they were like slasher, kind of like a slasher pick or something like that. And it was a little bit odd. So people were kind of wandering around, sort of worried about it, but nothing really came of it. So occasionally, speaking of that in the 70s again, there were people that would come. There was like the university had some kind of business, continuing education business thing or something down the hill there, and apparently there were people who knew it as a sorority previously. Who had been in fraternities in the University of Michigan, were kind of older, coming back for different courses and things. And they would occasionally come in, and of course, we're all men and women, somewhat different political backgrounds and orientations. And these guys would come in for like a panty raid, And it was sort of funny. Did they actually have that back in the 50s and stuff like that?
60s too.
In the 60s too. Yeah. And they would come in for a pantry raid. And the thing is, we all, male and female, we all just sort of took it with, good humor and everything else. And of course the guys would discover that, well, things are a little bit different now. There's maybe a few more guys in the house, and there's, and that the women were...
Boxers or briefs?
Yeah, I know. Right. We're a bit more sophisticated and everything else. And they would sort of calm down, and we would sit around and we'd talk about what it was like when it was a fraternity and what that kind of life was like. And, the women, of course, would maybe give them a little hard time, but it was also very, very good humored, It wasn't very, strident and mean or anything. It was like, okay, guys, it's like time to grow up or something. But it was fun. They were kind of reliving their old days, and we were enjoying their relating the past history of that house, which they still have the sorority girls' pictures up. They went through a stage where it was like a Zen retreat or monastery or something like that, and so they had some of the pictures are actually turned upside down. So all these pictures of sorority girls from different years, and some of them in their 1950s, their pink sweaters and the pearls and everything else, and some of them were upside down. And the thing is, when the co-op acquired it, we really didn't change any of that stuff. So it still had all the sorority stuff, from the Zen things, And then we had, but the beauty of it, as a fraternity or sorority house, one thing good about it was that they were made for like social things and parties and all that. They had big spaces for them. So we had a great grand piano, which we had some people who were very good at playing piano there, and we would have concerts from time to time, and we had a big fireplace. So you have a big fireplace, you have the piano, you have a good party going, and it would be usually very intelligent and excellent, the kind of way I always imagined parties should be, And as opposed to some of the ones, I think I have been to a few where I really wasn't all that intelligent, but let's see. One of the things I did remember that they used to have, I don't know if they still do, but they used to have lots of, me coming from the South, I kind of liked green things in the wintertime and stuff like that. But they had these forsythia that grew in front of this big window in one of our great party rooms. And in the wintertime, of course, they'd all be frozen and leafless, but you could clip them and we'd stick them in vases, in big things, and we let them bloom indoors, you know, so.
Yellow.
Yeah, so we'd have flowers during the wintertime, thanks to me. But, so there's many other things, all right, sorry about that. But there's many other things. Renaissance House was a little different experience. I remember going from house to house to house up there because everything was connected. Oh, I'm sorry. And I really enjoyed, I mean, I kind of enjoyed it because, and we had a lot of graduate students and that sort of thing. The odd thing about that was, of course, we also meet people from Texas, and I met a guy with my exact same name, who was a graduate student up at Renaissance House. You know, what I loved, they used the courtyard up there. There was a lot more theater and dancing and stuff in Ann Arbor in general back in those days. You know, performances, including street performances and music and stuff. And the courtyard out there was used, people would often do dance performances or something like that in the courtyard. Often impromptu, I mean, never planned, but then, you know, we had people from the dance department who would do performances. So it was excellent. It was a wonderful life. So, and that was, there's more I could say, but that's the 70s. So I'm sure more will come to me. But, all right, you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kate and Fritz, the Kate and Fritz summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't nail down the exact number. I know I came here 78, well, high school 77, right? So then college is 70, fall of 77. So for 2 years I lived in Bursley Hall in the aforementioned party. On the weekend of Hash. Right. Very creative, brainstorm. And most kids got in trouble, but you know, whatever. And so then, yeah, I was dating somebody who, Don Alexander, who lived in Vale House. And for whatever reason, I was sold on wanting to live in the co-ops. I mean, I was kind of a shy, nerdy, studious, but very political undergraduate in my first couple of years. And you know, I had some friends in the dormitory. And but then after meeting Don and visiting him in Vale House, I thought this seems like fun, you know. And I thought of the co-ops, well, especially after being there a few years, as kind of like a crunchy alternative Greek system, really, I guess you could say. International students, brainiacs, joint house at the time. I think I stayed in. I was telling a younger gal over here who was wanting to know about our meeting that Joint House had just, what's your name over there? Hi. Yeah. That Joint House was two houses that had been joined with a bridge kind of building and a kitchen in the middle. And then above that were like 6 very ugly boxy rooms called the ghetto. And I lived in one of the ghetto rooms. And
Well, those were desirable.
Those are great, yeah.
I lived there.
really,
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, wasn't there also a penthouse? There was a penthouse, and then the ghetto.
I lived in
And that house had like a big tire swing or something like that in the front yard.
I just forgot about the.
Yeah.
We used to have a marijuana room. I forgot about that.
And I think I wanted to move into Nakamura. I liked that neighborhood, Pizza Bob's and all that little stuff. But on second thought, I mean, God, it would have been a nightmare with the football games. And I was working on the Michigan Daily newspaper as a photographer. I wanted to be on the photography staff and not to go to football games, which is what everybody wanted to, you know, do. If they were going to be a photographer, you get like, you know, whatever you call those, right on the lines or whatever. I wanted to go to shows and punk rock shows. My younger sister, she's 8 years younger than me, had dropped out of high school and was really getting into punk rock. And she was 15 and had a serious mohawk. And I was doing portrait photography. But at Michigan Daily, I brought some of my clippings. My favorite one was when Abby Hoffman visited, and he said something like, today's college campuses are a hotbed of unrest, or of rest. of rest. You know, it's the 80s. I mean, everybody was complacent, and I remember when I was walking to campus from Joint House, seeing these little kids in these little, oh my God, Muffy and Biff and all that, all the frat kids. I mean, it was frightening. You know, Ronald Reagan was going to be elected president, and all these little kids in their little eyes-on sweaters and their Oxford shirts tucked in. I mean, that was the look, and the perfect hair, and the little pearls, and it was just frightening. It was like
Back to the 50s.
It was back to the,
it was
it was
back to the
Anniversary
50s.
of ICC.
It was disturbing. So so then I somehow chose to move to Vail, and that was a big choice because, you know, I just felt like I was in a corner of broad history there because it was just right around the corner from Mish House being next to the Minis, and those houses had borders. I think Vail had borders as well. We had a big kitchen in the basement with like a walk down, kind of like a garden basement entrance at the front of the house. And really, really good times there. You know, you did different jobs, and I think I did a lot of, I cooked now and then, and at the time the vegetarian diet was, the Bible of vegetarian cooking was the Moosewood Cookbook and Molly Katzen, and it was mostly all about cheese. And like, I'm lactose intolerant now. And I remember, I was telling Fritz this, that, I think I was cooking at Mish at the time. I was boarding. See, later on, I just lived in other houses nearby, and then I board, you know, at Mish. And we once had on our menu this recipe from like the Moosewood Cookbook called cheese beans. It's cheese and beans. And I don't know if anyone remembers the lentil soup from those days, but it was like mortar for building a house. It was not very enjoyable. Lots of cheese, lots of beans. And me and Naomi or whoever, we just laughed the whole time while we were cooking. We're having cheese beans. Cheese beans! Cracked each other up a lot. And at Vail, though, there was a couple of nice doubles or triples. There was two guys that were very popular, Mike Manuel and Neil Swinton. Mike was from the Philippines, or his family was from the Philippines, so he could speak a little Tagalog, and he was this very tall, he looked like a Native American, and he was all nice and, you know, multicultural and hip, and, you know, he's really into the Grateful Dead, and they always had music blasting from
Bob Marley.
Bob Marley,
Yeah.
and the Grateful Dead,
Yeah.
though. Oh, God, the Grateful Dead. So, yeah, they knew, they were deadheads. And Neil Swinton came from big publishing money, I believe.
His dad was president of UPI for a while.
Yeah. It was an odd couple sort of situation, but they seemed to get along great, so yeah. And I remember when they were advocating for every now and then you'd have to buy new mattresses for the house. And they were like adamantly arguing for futons, and they were like, why can't we use the house money to buy futons? This is cultural imperialism. It was just like, and a big volleyball court out back, even though I was very klutzy, I occasionally played. We had a beer machine, you know, where you could get long necks instead of pops
excellent.
for like a quarter. Yeah, because we lived just a block or so behind us was this place called the Beer Vault, which was a drive-through beer. Yes. So you know, someone would haul over there. Very few people had cars. Maybe someone would have a car or just carry a case of beer on their shoulders, kind of behind community high school. And, you know, stock up the pop machine with cheap long-neck beers.
So people under 21 could have.
It was the drinking age was 18 at the time.
Yeah, because still the Vietnam War thing.
Yeah. So, you know, but there was never really any trouble with drinking. I mean, it wasn't like...
Reagan days. I think it went up to 21 the Reagan days.
Yeah.
Under the 55.
Yeah, because you couldn't vote until you were 21 after that point. You could still be drafted. And there was a lot of noise about that. But yeah, so, but there was really never that much crazy uncontrolled drinking. I mean, there were people, my drinking sure spiked at times, but a lot of parties. We had that big room. In fact, I attribute my knee problems today to dancing like crazy on the tile floor. And kind of like funk, it was like post-disco, and I'm from the Detroit area, and I loved funk music, like Parliament Funkadelic, Bootsy Collins, George Clinton, who still plays. He played at the Concert of Colors at the Detroit, in Detroit. But, you know, we just danced like maniacs. I mean, there was punk rock, there was new wave, there was funk. And it all kind of mixed all right, you know?
Yeah,
And
the 70s was a disco time and the
Yeah.
dancing and all that, so you had still had
well,
the
we
days.
liked disco too. We would go to the Rubaiyat,
Yeah.
the gay bar,
Yeah.
because they had the best music there and the best DJs.
I never could understand what the point of a gay bar. When I was here, I never could. It's like in Ann Arbor, it doesn't seem like you really needed to have a place where people.
Well, no, they did, because, yeah,
I mean,
because
but
the
it was
other
nice.
bars were like a lot of sports bars.
Yeah,
Droolies and whatever the other, you know, frat bars.
Frat
were.
bars.
So no, it was great. It was great to go to the Rubaiyat. It was like, you know, kind of vicarious, gay.
Was the Gandhi Dancer, that was that time too?
Yeah, that was a fancy restaurant.
Oh, it was, because of that.
What else? What was the other bar?
Pretzel
Second Chance. We go to Second Chance a lot.
Okay, Rick's.
So Fritz, Rick's American Cafe. See, Fritz was in a band called the Flexibles. Saxophone player, and Steve Tynan, Dave Osborne, a guy from England.
Wow.
I mean, just really great interactions with people. I mean, I got turned on to so many things. Like, I had a really good friend who was into country music. And around that time, too, I remember Elvis Costello came out with a record of covers of country songs. And I was a huge fan. Me and a bunch of other kids from around those houses, Kathy Rettenbach, and a few of us would always go to see George Bedard and the Kingpins. And George Bedard was a really amazing guitar player. It still is. Still is a great, great guitar player. I mean, he could be in Nashville or Austin. And he had a really encyclopedic novel, sort of repertoire of George Jones and Porter Wagner. And,
Wow.
I mean,
Okay,
really
that's
old.
really
He had a
bad.
whole
That's
little
old, yeah.
subgenre that he called Psychobilly, you know, like, I'm gonna go nuts and put me in the rubber room and songs like, and we go to every single gig.
Yeah.
We have to wrap it up. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, all right. Well,
She's
Fritz
reminding
wants
you
to talk.
Somebody has a chance to talk.
Fritz needs to talk because
All right, yeah,
somehow
we
we
got-
met through Vale and.
I'll just be really short. I'm not a big talker. No, I moved to Ann Arbor after I'd already finished college. I went to college in Colorado and I had taught school for a year, and then I moved here. And when I moved here, I basically decided I just was tired of trying to fit in, and I just wanted to sort of drop out. I moved here and started playing my saxophone on street corners and stuff like that. And then I met people. I lived in a room. I rented a room in a house at Lawrence and then boarded at Vale at first. And then I moved into Vale. And then I was the oldest person in Vale, so they elected me president of the club. Even though I was the only person there that wasn't going to classes, I think. I was playing in a band and working in a restaurant the whole time. But we had a lot of fun and all these parties that Kate was talking about.
And he had a built-in following for the Flexible, because he
Yeah.
would see his
Yeah.
band all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
What were the years that you were here?
I moved into Vale and starting in '79, and I stayed there till about '85. Yeah.
And after I had moved out of Vale but was still living in Ann Arbor, my younger sister Sarah, who dropped out of high school and had a mohawk, I mean, she went to Oak Park High for a little while, and she was hardcore punk rock, and she could not be convinced to go back to school there. I tried to talk to her about, she was artistic and creative and smart as hell, but she was not going to go back, So she puttered around and messed around. My mother was kind of like, whatever, I can't do anything with her. She puttered in the garden and worked at like Frank's nursery and watched TV. And finally talked her into coming back to go to school at Community High, which was a half block down from Vale House. An alternative high school that started out, what was it called, Earthworks?
It's still.
Oh, yeah,
Earthworks, yeah. Well, we just had, Community High School just had a big, like, 40-year reunion this
I was
summer.
there.
Comstock.
Oh, no, I was out.
Comstock, and it was a big weekend thing. And Sarah finally got talked into, in fact, I remember bringing her to I believe, a Xanadu party. We were trying to figure out what house she could go into.
Yeah.
And it worked out great. She ended up in Vale House, so I had friends. I knew she was gonna get 3 squares a day and all the guff you could eat. And, you know, walk half a block down to community high school. And she made great connections there. And she turned out to be, you know, a great person and well-traveled and masters in, what do you call that? Garden.
Horticulture?
No,
Landscape?
landscape architecture.
Oh, that's nice.
And has traveled to Israel and Europe, and she's now converted to Judaism and married to a rabbi and living in New Jersey with 2 kids. I know, she wanted to be here, but it's like in the middle of all the Jewish high holidays.
Oh, yeah,
She's a rabbi's wife. and all that.
She's a rabbi's wife. Yeah.
I thought the co-ops generally radicalized people. I didn't think that would have the other.
Well, that was later.
Was anybody else here before 85?
I wanted to say, did anybody ever hear of SNCC House?
SNCC, yeah. What did it stand for though, SNCC?
Well,
I remember that.
during the time when Martin Luther King was working in the South, and then
Student
after those
Non-violent. Coordinating committee.
they were picketing in Ann Arbor, but they picketed the Cressy's building. They also picketed the city government because the housing in Ann Arbor was so terrible that it was really not integrated, and the black people were sort of assigned to certain districts. But after that, the students all across the country, I believe, were trying to go down in the South and help with the registration. And help with the, get registered to vote. And so Lester House became SNCC House because it was the students in the Nonviolent Coordinating Committee that were that mainly in that group. And they, so we had 2 students who stored all their work leaflets in our garage when they went down. But Lester House was registering to go, and after this was sort of closed off, we had 1 student who never came back, and nobody knew where she went. She went down there to register people, and some people had seen her occasionally, but she never came back to claim the things that were in her trunk.
She was still alive.
Yeah, she was traveling around and she was,
Disappeared.
I think he was from India, but he did finally come back. But the student co-ops were very involved in that period in terms of a kind of a political action. Lester House was the key house. I thought,
Yeah, it was a great story. I haven't heard
Well,
that. Where's Gigi
1985.
Bosch? Is she still around?
She's not here. She's around.
Because she was,
1985 was an interesting year. That was kind of a break point. I want to tell a little story in there because I said that I would. But what happened at that time, you can look at different points in ICC's history when there were major changes. So we started buying houses in 1944. When they first hired Luther, that was an important change. Or in 51. When we tripled in size, you know, and suddenly we had 600 instead of 200, that's a huge change. 1985 was another really important year. That was when Luther retired, became the executive director. And coincidentally, I can't really claim credit for this, although I'd like to think I helped it along. There were just a tremendous number of other things that happened during that point. Entire governance was changed at the ICC. But perhaps most importantly, it started moving. There had been 13 years after that huge expansion. There were 13 years when nothing had been purchased. And in 1985, I'd just come in and I'd taken over from Luther in February. And in August, I got a call saying that these houses across the street here by the rock that are now called Luther houses were on the market from the city Yogadown, which is a Buddhist group that was here in town, and their guru had told them that they had to sell property.
Money.
We didn't have the money for it, but there were a couple people. Now, you have to remember, this was a time when there was a huge recession just ending. That was when the last person
That was the
in
Reagan
Michigan
recession.
please move out. And
People forget about
please
it.
leave the state. You know, it turned out well. And
Yeah, right, I know.
And a couple of us went over to look at these houses. We sat down in the basement with you and said, well, wouldn't that be fun? And I said, but yeah, we can't do it. We don't have any money, we can't do it. And then I thought, well, what if we traded out Xanadu for these houses?
Sacrifice.
And at that time, because of the recession, we were having tremendous vacancies. There was up to 13% vacancies in the Ann Arbor housing market. And there were 60-some people over there, and we were having tremendous vacancy problems in the house. North Campus was in the same situation, and also Lenny Bruce's house just down the street here, because they were further away. And that was the thing, people had doubled up in the apartments and created a lot of vacancies in the market. And everybody was competing to be the lowest in charges. It was difficult for the co-ops to compete with what they were doing in terms of the private market. So we thought this would be possible. Why not? Just trade it out. We've got one down here that isn't working very well. We had a lot of trouble with people at that point too. They were in open rebellion against the ICC, who they blamed for all of the problems. Obviously, it was because people at the front desk were saying, you have to move into Xanadu. Don't go there. You know, that's why they were having vacancies. So it's a long story, but I said, okay, let's do it. And we had a vote, and we put in an offer, accepted. So I called up HUD. Now, we borrowed money from HUD during the meantime to do a lot of renovation work around the whole system. Vail House, there was a gut renovation on Vail House that we just a few years earlier. And we had mortgaged all of our houses to HUD, with the exception of King. And I called them up and I said, hi, we have this great idea. We just want to sort of change houses. We could substitute the collateral. And they said, oh, you can't do it. Okay, so much for that idea. And they said, but Ronald Reagan is trying to balance the budget by selling assets. So he's offering a 50% discount on mortgages if you buy it out. And we had a $2 million loan from HUD, and that meant that we could pay it off with $1 million. Okay. That sounds like a good idea. And the co-op bank, National Cooperative Bank had been created just a few years earlier. I knew a lot of people who were involved in that. This was good. They're in Washington. And I called them up. Buy these houses. I said, okay, we'll pay off this loan. So we had a lot of collateral, you know, this property. Wasn't a problem with that. But the program that Ronald Reagan had for this discount expired at the end of September, at the end of the federal fiscal year. And we were coming down the wire. We couldn't get it done before the last day. They decided that they had to have the lawyers come. This was a huge loan for the co-op bank at that point. They flew their lawyers in from Washington, D.C., and there was a hurricane coming up the coast. So they weren't sure they could get out of the airport. They just barely made it out of the airport, and they were worried they were going to have to parachute the papers down.
This would be good music with this one. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah.
So the day before the end of it was actually the day before the day we signed the papers finally, and they had to get them to the Federal Reserve through that system on the last day of the federal fiscal year, which was like pulling teeth because everybody's trying to do transactions on the last day. They had to do it that day, and everybody, stayed up half the night to get this in on the first thing in the morning so that they could get it through. And it took a couple hours, but finally it all went through. That was interesting, but what happened was that we had to buy those houses before we actually had sold Xanadu. And we had to sell Xanadu in order to afford it. So we had this deal worked out where we were kind of, had this little purgatory period in here. And we put Xanadu up for sale, and we got only 2 offers. The one that we liked the best was from a sorority. And we accepted it, but then they couldn't get the financing. They dropped out. We had only 1 offer left. This was from a fraternity. And they wanted to use their old house as the down payment for the, and we would carry the rest on a land contract. There's a co-op across the street here called Black Elk that was the down payment. We called it Whoops House. It was kind of accidental that we got this. All of a sudden, it was, when we had sold Xanadu and bought Luther, we didn't really have any change in the membership to speak of. It was like a trade-out, just a different house. But buying this place, Black Elk, all of a sudden we actually had an increase in the number of members for the first time in 13 years. And that got people really excited. It was sort of concrete proof that we were moving again in some way, and that changes were happening. And they became very willing to consider other things, to change other aspects of how the organization was set up. And we started buying other houses after that. This house is the last one, actually, that we bought, but there were several others. Some of you that are more recent would know about Linder, Ruth's, Kagawa was another one. And this house was purchased after our 50th anniversary of purchase the first house, when Carl Gregory, one of our alums, lived in the old house, I believe, came and said that he'd come into the lunch money and he wanted to see if he could help us buy another house. The suddenly came over. We were very fortunate during that whole period to have these opportunities. And a lot of that sort of dried up, and it's really difficult to find property now. But I think that 85 always stands out in my mind, not just because of what happened in terms of momentum of the organization, that change, but also because of what I remember happening socially in the organization because of all that. We experienced a real golden age in the 80s, in the late 80s, when everything was really awful in my opinion. And most of the society, the whole Reagan thing was going on, and it was not a good time in a lot of ways. But for the ICC, I think there were people who were energized by all of that change that went on, and who became the core of a board and officer group that really did some amazing things during that period. So that's my bridge story here.
How are the co-ops doing now with the economy and everything?
We'll get to that.
So you sold our marijuana growing facility over there at Xanadu to a fraternity.
There was still one under the under the dining room in Joy House. So.
I see. So we said,
Yeah, Joy House had kind of a double Before we go to the work, can you tell us when Brandeis was converted to the 803 Kingsley to an individual? I mean,
that was about,
that was for married.
That was
yes,
about,
it was married
originally
students.
for married students. After World War II, they bought that. It was converted just maybe 6 months earlier than all of this happened in '85. There was so much change that occurred during that period, and it was because the university had built a lot of married student housing up here on the North Campus. That was very good housing and very reasonable price, and really better than what we could offer in a lot of ways. A lot of non-students started moving into Brandeis.
I have a question about that. It seems like there was always just that little extra understanding of what co-ops were really for. And it always seems that we always had, because there was a little bit of that sense of an intentional community.
Yeah.
So sometimes when people weren't students, but they would add to the culture of the house, or you know, they were maybe musicians.
Vail had a few people like that, like there was one
Yeah,
gal.
well, and Xanadu had T. Casey Brennan, who was kind of infamous and famous at the same time. You know, the comic book writer, and
Oh.
you know, and a few other things. And he was among many. He was a non-student, but he definitely added to the house. I was barely a student at one point. I was only at the Washington Community College taking, I don't remember how many courses, but
Yeah.
you know, but
Yeah, it was very inclusive.
Yeah.
Vail House had a gal who was an emancipated
That's
teenager.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
A couple of
Yeah.
gals who had to leave their family situations because of bad situation.
Yeah, and there were also some older people that allowed for continuity. I don't know if they ever went to.
Roma?
Yeah, I think so.
Roma?
Yeah, and there was an older. I remember an older black lady.
Oh yeah, Edna. What was her name?
Yeah.
Emma Brace.
Emma Brace. Emma Brace.
And I don't remember if she ever went to university.
And
or
it
she
didn't
probably
matter. She
did.
was like
There were-
the Grandma Moses.
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
co-op.
There were always a lot of non-students. This is not a movement.
No.
Is it
It's
still?
true.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Good.
But they're
Good to know.
admitted under different processes.
Yeah.
And you have developed techniques as you mentioned earlier.
Oh.
At your house.
Myron Browning?
Myron Browning was there for 26 years.
Yeah, he started the freshman 57.
The local officials have a lot of sway and they don't want to lose their tax base, which we can understand too, actually.
But though it's to their advantage to have especially for students to be able to live at a. I mean, you could probably. How much does it add to the house's? You know, the fees.
Quite a bit, and it's just to say we're working on it.
We're working on it.
Yeah.
You need any help?
Possibly. I'll pass that on to Eric.
Maybe
He's taking the lead on it.
Yeah, and you could point it out to some of the, because I would like to live in one of these houses. I do think it seems odd that with the depressed property values and everything else that the rates they seem a little bit high to me into the circumstance. In Austin, of course, they would be excellent, but because property values are very high there, so. Yeah, I'd like to spend maybe a month or two if one of the houses will vote me in, but living in kind of looking over the co-ops, and if I could help with that issue, I did do some lobbying in our horrible Texas legislature, so I'm not sure exactly. I'm sure maybe they could be a little more rational here, and then I don't have much hope for any politicians anywhere. But,
I'm not sure if Eric's still here, but he's really.
No, he left. He had to go.
Maybe it didn't.
Yeah, because I'd even be glad to go there and talk to politicians if you need.
We had our local congresswoman working on it with us, so we've done everything we can. So there was, like Jim was saying, there was a lot of interest that didn't want it to happen.
Well,
so
don't give up.
Well, we haven't.
Yeah, it's important.
I think we're pretty much up through the 80s, unless there's somebody here from the late 80s. Not the 90s. Who was here in the 90s? I think Anjanette maybe is a good person to talk about the 90s.
Yeah, so the bridge that you were building earlier leads right up to when I came into the ICC. I think it was the first year that I was in the ICC, was also the first year that people were living in Gregory House. It had just been bought. And is it still a substance-free house? Yeah, so it started with the substance-free mission, which is really cool. And I lived at Luther House, which was another one of the houses that you talked about the ICC purchasing. And I remember that the reason I ended up at Luther House, I had lived in the dormitories my freshman year, and it wasn't really my thing. And so I'd heard about the co-ops, and I went to this mass meeting at the Michigan Union, and kind of like some people were at tables, and so we walked around and everything, and then there was like this commotion, and there was this marching band that came into the ballroom where it was at, and it was the Luther House members, and they had like gathered up different members and had this, they came in and played music, and I was like, I think that's where I want to live. And it was just a really, really creative time. There were musicians and artists. We had, every time we had a party, it was a very big costume affair where people would start like a month in advance preparing what they were going to wear. And we had like space alien parties, and we used, I think maybe we inherited the Xanadu Halloween party because then Luther became the big.
I saw you had that one house, that turned into a graduate house. I mean, I guess, I don't know what kind of party culture they had there, but it's certainly different than our Xanadu culture. And one where you have, plans and it's an event, that's a different thing than just whatever they were doing there, I think.
Oh, I didn't live at Joint House.
Oh, no.
I lived at Luther.
Yeah, no,
But
yeah.
I just mean that we had the Halloween party. The co-op Halloween party was at Luther.
I mean, as an enjoyable experience at the co-op, I think that's partying is a great thing. It's too bad when the culture, goes in a different direction, I don't know. And people become alienated from each other and all that. So,
yeah, for us it was a real coming together kind of point, and like, people working on costumes and sewing things, and we had like an art show and a fashion show, and because it was just all these different artists and musicians and folks, and what else? Also, I was really involved with the board of directors when I was in the ICC, and we tried really hard to buy another house while I was there. We looked at a number of houses. We tried to buy the Oxford housing that came up, which was a big set of university buildings and housing that I don't remember if that went to referendum or if we didn't get that far.
The university pulled out of it.
Okay. I remember at one point we had a referendum to try and buy maybe
that was a co-op that the university ran.
Right.
And so it would have been really natural to just pick it up.
The university, the housing office called it the Revenge of the Dean of Women. That place was built in about 1966, 65 maybe.
65.
And it was built as co-ops because they saw the ICC being very successful and they wanted in on that idea.
My wife lived there.
And a lot of people that moved to the co-ops here used to live there. It was really a bummer in a lot of ways because they didn't know how to do co-ops up there.
Yeah, I guess she boarded at Owen House. And she and several of the Oxford girls boarded at Owen House.
Do you know how many beds they had, if you would have purchased,
It was big. I don't remember. It was very big. The university housing office people actually suggested that we try to buy it, but we got blocked by some other interests in the financial office and so forth. They were having a lot of trouble operating it, and if we could have done it, it would have been great. But,
Yeah. We looked at a lot of houses, and that was one of them.
Is it still the university owned then, or?
Is it Conference Center now?
Yeah, I got a conference center up there, and I don't know what they're doing.
So I don't know, and then I don't know. There's a lot. Yeah, it was like after that, Jim and I both ended up working at NASCO, so then we just did co-ops all over.
Who was here after that period? In the 2000s?
I was here in the early 2000s. I moved in to North Campus in 2001. And, I was coming from outside, I moved here from Chicago, so I didn't really know anything about, Ann Arbor or the University of Michigan. I just knew that the co-op sounded like something I wanted to experience. I lived in what we called a co-op. It was basically a student rented house that we ran cooperatively, but, we had a landlord, and once I moved into the ICC, I noticed that we were really, we were really, having good intentions, but this was like the full-blown, cooperative experience. So I moved into North Campus because I knew I could get a single room there later right off the bat, and I was already finished with graduate school, coming here for a postdoc. So I figured, okay, well, I've already done my time with roommates. I deserve to have my own room. And moving into North Campus, is a quite interesting experience because it's very heavily populated with graduate students, international students, And of course, a lot of the people that would be going to school up at North Campus, you know, in engineering, architecture, arts and music. And it just has a real intellectual and international vibrancy. Like one of my favorite parts is that at every dinner conversation, you know, every dinner we'd have an amazing conversation, and it could be anything. It could be serious, like global geopolitics. It could be about history. And the thing is, you know, we'd have a fairly large table with a whole bunch of people around with a lot of different backgrounds, and you know, pretty much any topic you can think of, there was a resident expert on the table. You know, so we'd be talking about ancient Egypt, and there was someone who was actually an archaeologist doing digs in Egypt, or you know, somebody who you know was an expert in something else. So just really amazing, you know, high quality conversations that weren't always even, you know, so highfalutin intellectual. Sometimes we would just joke around, but it was at a very high level. So that was a very interesting experience. And I also wanted to get the Central Campus Co-op experience, because some of my friends from North Campus and I would come down to the Central Campus Co-ops when they had parties. And this was a lot of fun, and this was a big, I mean, I'm sure it still goes on now, but this was a big form of socialization that, you know, co-op would have a party, and then they would send flyers to all the other houses, and then people would come to the party. And it was just a very, you know, very open, welcoming experience. And anytime you went to another cooperative, we would come in and say, oh yeah, we're from, you know, such and such, and everyone would be friendly because, you know, we all had this, you know, sort of shared ownership of the system. So we didn't feel like we were going to some other house because it was our house too. And of course, you know, everyone welcomed us, and that went along well. So I also, you know, wanted to have that, you know, just get a taste of that experience. So I moved into Black Elk, you know, across the street for a summer, and that was a really another amazing and contrasting experience, because North Campus, you know, is definitely, you know, an older population, people who are, you know, very intelligent, but you know, much more sort of studious and focused on their studies. Like I think I probably now know about a dozen university professors who were, you know, my former housemates up at North Campus. Central Campus was, you know, younger, more vibrant, more festive, and had a really strong sense of community. I lived in, you know, Black Elk, which is one of the 3 vegetarian houses, and sort of within the co-op system, there was, you know, even a strong sense of community between those 3 vegetarian houses. You know, they would go back and forth and visit. You know, people would come over for dinner. It was almost like that was a larger, you know, a larger community, and it was a lot of fun. You know, there were definitely a lot of parties, but with you know, with that sort of scene, it was much more like the costume parties. You know, there'd be a giant box of costumes, and you know, people would really get into the themes. Like, I remember one time there was a communist party, and people actually like dressed up, you know, in like pseudo, you know, socialist regalia. Then there's a capitalist party that I borrowed a banker's suit to. And, you know, this fellow Nathan dressed up as the Statue of Liberty. And, you know, Ryan Hughes dressed up like a millionaire with money around his hat. People really got into the theme, and compared to you know, some of the parties that I went to, you know, elsewhere as an undergraduate, where having a house party meant that people got a keg of beer and put it in the basement. Everyone stood around, you know, drinking the beer. I mean, there might have been alcohol there, but it was almost like an afterthought. People were just there to be festive and engaged, and it was, you know, it was a really wonderful experience. So, and I think a couple of the, you know, a few of the highlights. You know, actually, the biggest thing that probably happened at North Campus I missed because I was traveling Europe for a conference at the time, but there was a giant blackout on the East Coast. Like, if you remember, I don't know, maybe like
2003, August 2003.
Yeah, the power
I
grid.
was included in it.
Okay, yeah.
I live, yeah.
Yeah, the power grid went out
Yeah.
in the northeast US
It
and
did here
parts of
too.
Canada. Yeah, and the thing was, it was like the power was out for several hours and people were realizing, oh wait, it's not coming back on. And they heard somehow, you know, somebody must have had a radio or heard the news that it could be out for days. So then, you know, there they were, they didn't have any power, they couldn't really do their, you know, their work, because most people were working on computers and whatnot, and then they're realizing, well, we've got all this food that's gonna spoil, so they basically pulled out the barbecue pits and started grilling all the meat, and then they had all this beer that was gonna go bad, so they brought out all the beer, and it literally turned into a giant party, because there was nothing else you could do, and you had to make sure that this meat or beer was consumed before like that, so. Right, so that.
That's right.
You know, so that became legendary in North Campus history. In Central Campus, and there's just a strong atmosphere of spontaneous fun. You know, we would just decide, oh, why don't we let's go swimming up at Pickerel Lake. So, you know, we would go up and we'd go swimming up at the lake, or, you know, other really spontaneous fun events. So it's a really vibrant, vibrant culture, and lots of really amazing experiences. So I'm really glad that I got to experience it, and I sort of got a tour of different parts of the system. I also lived in King House, which was the apartment co-ops on Kingsley that folks had mentioned before, and that was an interesting experience. It was a different sort of experience, and I guess there was kind of that notion that this is where co-operators go to retire, in a sense of it was transitional. There was a big wait list for the house, so. Everyone who was in there had been a co-operator in the other houses, but we had our own apartments, and there was no common space or common meals, so it was sort of like being in a larger building where we did run the house as a whole cooperatively, but it was much more like everyone had their own space and had their own life, and it was a good experience, and definitely. Something that I would consider superior to any of the rental apartments, both in terms of the cost, because it was way below the market, but also it was still part of the co-op system, and you could borrow the ICC truck, you could connect with the people in their houses, so it's still, still connected to the co-op system as a whole, so that was, another great experience as well.
That's great. Well, is anybody else here from recent times?
I'm a current.
Okay, well, yeah, Jeremiah too. Jeremiah is earlier than you. Let's have Jeremiah first, and then you can tell us what's happening.
Oh, I don't know much, Jim.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, I guess during my time, 2008 to 2011, I did a lot of work on the board as the EdCom VP and then president the next year. So I guess a lot of my perspective is from that. I mean, the houses, we still have parties. Luther's Halloween party is probably the best known party in Ann Arbor, like, for the entire year. Sorry. Let's see what else. And yeah, there's still, houses still kind of have parties. It's getting me. Still having parties together.
Jeremiah?
Yeah.
Can you talk about the training and education and
Yeah.
some of the things that have gone on?
Right. So kind of the experience we were having is the board was kind of transitioning. Members are kind of in a different spot as far as like what you guys probably remember as the trainings and people knowing how to take care of basic things in a house. A lot of our members are coming to us with having lived with their parents for 18 years and never really having to do anything short of tying their own shoes. So teaching people how to use plungers is an actual thing. Yeah, it's hard to believe. So education is actually becoming a much bigger thing because we have to teach people not only how to be co-opers, but how to take care of a house, how to it sounds silly, but how to change a light bulb, how to how to use a dryer, how to use a washer and dryer. I mean, these are basic life skills that we're having to teach. I mean, some members come in with this experience, not to say everyone who who joins now hasn't lived on their own, but the vast majority are, 18 years old and never really been on their own. So we've kind of had to, it was, when I was there, it was kind of a transitional period of kind of thinking our members can, pick up on these things and kind of starting from square one, teaching about being co-opers and teaching how to be kind of adults and homeowners, really. And something that was kind of big the last year I was here was the pet policy. We passed the budget pretty quickly, $2.5 million budget, but when co-opers want to own pets, that's something they're really passionate about. Because we had some issues with it. We had, at King House, we had an apartment that had about $10,000 worth of damage done to it because someone had pets that were just running around freely.
Maybe you need to have training on how to raise pets with houses.
Some people just don't really, they like pets, but they don't think they
realize
have to take
what
care
it
of them.
takes. Yeah.
Right. I'm sorry. What was your question?
What kind of animals were running around?
Rats, dogs, wasn't it?
I don't actually remember.
Oh, okay.
No.
Eric would know. He's very passionate about, because he had to deal with these issues, and we had someone who moved into the apartment after that and just did all they could, but they're like, I can't live in this. So we had to take a loss on that apartment and put in a lot of money. So we had to kind of come to the board, because we had a pet policy, but it wasn't really working. It was kind of like people would vote, say yay or nay, the whole house would. But we wanted to kind of ask ourselves, are we a place that houses people or students, or are we a place that houses pets? And the year of my last year, the board probably spent more time on that discussion. We finally came to a resolution, like some houses would be known as pet houses and others wouldn't.
That's good.
So I think it was a good compromise, but it took a lot of time, and it's interesting what the members take, what I found, like what would be taken so passionately. The issue of wanting to have a cat, but, and I agree, I think I heard someone say that charges, I would like charges to be a little bit lower, because the diversity, we don't necessarily have we have diversity, but it's definitely not like our earlier days. Where,
economic diversity.
Right, we've kind of become,
yeah.
I wouldn't say stagnated, but people have kind of this is where I live because, this is my background. And a lot of the surveys we've done, if we want to attract people of different backgrounds, we kind of have to get away from this idea that the co-ops are like the hippie houses that are just places where people think it's
not just for bourgeois.
Right, it's
socialists.
not bougie to be living in filth,
Yeah.
which sometimes people feel like that's what the co-ops are, this place that, we had a history of being radicals, but now it wasn't radicals who didn't care about their houses. So we got to balance that with our membership now, as far as letting them know, you can have your ideals about, going against the system, but we still have a system here that co-op is still a system. We're not running anarchy houses, and some people kind of felt anything the board does is an infringement on their house.
Even anarchy has a system. So,
Yeah.
So even anarchy has a system. I mean,
Well,
anarchism.
Anarchism is a system.
Anarchism
Anarchy
is a system. Yes.
is whatever you want.
Yes, anarchy is a bit different, right?
So, like the end of the video said, it's kind of where the future holds us, takes us, is kind of up to the current members. We're making great improvements in our maintenance. Our director of annual maintenance, Jeff Mayers, has put a lot of time into our houses. So we're in a very good position that way. Our houses are. We're passing housing inspections on the first round, which was unheard of a few years ago. And Eric's very big on maintenance. So I think our houses are good in a foundation-wise. They're solid places. We just gotta kind of work on this. The transition of the student population that is kind of coming to us with an inability to know what it means to be a homeowner. Which at 18, most of them,
Do you still have work holidays?
Oh yeah, work holidays. Every house has them.
How do do people get trained on how to do maintenance?
We have the maintenance committee, which is made up, every house has a maintenance manager, which is an elected position.
Yeah.
And they have, I think, weekly meetings sometimes.
But how do they learn? Like, okay, the pipe,
The
because a couple of us were like, we didn't know what the hell to do.
Well,
Like,
Jeff Mayers trains, every week they have a different topic. So one week it'll be
Okay.
how to unclog a drain.
Okay.
Next week will be, basic electrical. Like, we don't want them to do like heavy
Right.
maintenance stuff, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, that's one of our advertisements too, is that people can come here and learn, pick up skills that they may not, they definitely won't learn living in the dorm,
Yeah.
you know?
And you're might gonna need it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we have our officer training, which Susan has a big part in. We have house presidents, house treasurers. I think all the positions. Not really sure if there's been really much change in that, except that we now require training, which wasn't. We had a problem there for a few years where people would be elected and would never come to their trainings. So they didn't. We'd have
Just like real politics.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, I know.
So we have people who are treasurers not knowing what they were doing.
We don't want career politicians. We want
Yeah, I think that's-
no experience running our government.
Yes.
I just have one question.
Yeah.
Since, when we were in co-ops in the 1960s, we had house mothers still with women rule. That changed maybe in the late 60s. But is there somebody like a resident advisor? Does the president serve that role if there are interpersonal conflicts?
In the
things
house?
Like that, in the house,
We-
to sort out?
There's the DART, which is the Dispute Assistance and Resolution Team.
Wait, say that again?
Yes,
So-
Susan can talk about this.
So to answer your question, Kitty, yes, the House President is often the focal point for members, the person they might turn to say, I'm having a problem here, or this isn't working out. And if they're doing the job, the House President might even see those things before they're even addressed. So we still, because we believe in member empowerment, we still encourage members to resolve issues of conflict or disagreement or difficulty
Interpersonally, right.
within the House, right?
Yes.
But we've also come to realize that a lot of members, there are different ways people deal with conflict, and there are different styles, and members need support and they need help. So a few years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago now, we set up what is essentially called the Dispute Assistance Resolution Team. And our intention is never to resolve an issue or problem for the member or for the House, but to offer them the kind of support that they might need to get through that difficult situation. And so we can offer them a number of services, from basic conflict coaching to mediation to shuttle negotiation or just some type of facilitated conversation. And that group is made up of a couple of staff members, myself included, and members from the ICC membership body as well. And we make sure we're trained. So we're trained in a number of areas. So for instance, sexual harassment, issues around mental health, discrimination and oppression, very heavily on that. And we have often gotten members on the team who come to the team because that's their area of study in some form or another. Yeah, and that's where they want to do professionally. So we've really had some great groups of people. Right now we have two really, excuse the language, kick-ass chairs of the DART, as we call it, who bring a really superb set of skills, and they're both of them are moving in that direction professionally. So I think it's a great resource for houses, but still, the wish is always that we help members, if they want it or if they need it, to work through these situations themselves, because that's really the experience of community, both the positives and the less than positives.
Susan, I heard by, I'd run into somebody who, I guess Vail House went through some crisis type situations with some sexual harassment or something like that, and they had to go all female for a little while, is that correct?
Oh, yeah, Jim, were you
Back in the 90s?
That was a long time back.
That was quite a while ago.
I just wanted to catch up on that.
It didn't last very long.
It lasted 2 years, yeah.
The house itself wanted to go co-ed again.
Okay.
We thought that would be a cool thing to have an all-women's house.
Uh-huh.
And I still think that's the case, but the people who were there after the first year didn't feel like that was what they wanted.
So they kind of had a cleansing almost of the bad stuff or whatever.
It wasn't.
It wasn't that bad?
It was an attempt to replace, like all the houses go up and down. I mean, all of your houses have gone up in town, it's true.
After a while.
And we've had different ways that we've tried to deal with those situations, depending on how serious they were. That was an attempt at one point to solve some problems that we had at Vail. It wasn't as successful as we would like.
Had it just gotten to be too much of a party house kind of situation?
I don't remember the exact situation.
I think that's kind of.
And, you know, it isn't always parties. I don't think that's quite the right characterization. Generally speaking, you have cultures in each of these houses that become dysfunctional in one way or another. And it might not be the social party thing. It could be a number of other things that happen. I don't remember in that particular case.
Okay.
But we're definitely getting into the current times here. And I'd like to hear your perspectives on this stuff before we just start talking about stuff. You know, why don't you talk about what you see happening now?
Okay, well, I guess I'll start off with kind of like
What's your name?
Oh, I'm Rashmi, by the way, for those of you I haven't like met personally. I'm the one who's been kind of spamming your inboxes the last 2 weeks, but I'm Rashmi. I first moved into Black Elk 2011, so it was my junior year, it was last year. And I guess to kind of like attest to some of the things Jeremiah has talked about as far as life skills go, I remember just being completely like shocked, I guess, by the general disorder that was in that house, like neatness wise, because I guess I am like one of those people who is kind of like sheltered, like all her life, and then like now, like I lived in the dorms the first 2 years, so you know, you don't really have as many responsibilities for like cleaning up after yourself and like dealing with a bunch of different things that you have to do when you like live in a house. So for me, like it was definitely like this introduction to, you know, taking care of yourself and like your house and like living with a whole bunch of people. And I guess my first reaction was like, okay, I just don't want to deal with this. Like, I don't want to, like, clean up. Like, I don't want to deal with maggots or, like, I don't want to deal with, like, taking care of compost.
Compost.
So,
Compost happens.
Yes.
But I think, you know, I kind of, like, I was meant to, like, go through those experiences and, like, just, like, find a way to, like, adjust to, like, people's like different lifestyles. And you know, like I feel like my first semester I was just adjusting, so I kind of went with the flow. Like I guess I was just like kind of seething inside when like people would just like leave dirty dishes everywhere. But I think I realized like I wasn't really alone, and like there were other housemates who we kind of like banded together and like really started trying to like set a different example in the house. And I think it's like really amazing like how, you know, you can kind of like change the tide of things inside of your house if you just like kind of take the initiative. And I think it really ended up working out well. Like I think like in spite of like some of those challenges of dealing with people from like who have like different like lifestyles than you or whatever, like you kind of, I mean obviously you learn a lot, but like it's also kind of adventurous at the same time, like, you know, like just seeing what people are up to, you know, at 2 a.m. like when you're studying or what other people are doing. So I think that was a really fun experience. I really liked the smaller scale parties that we had, like our progressives. I think it was just really relaxing. And like I think sometimes it's hard, like if you feel very new in a social situation, to open up and to like feel comfortable. And like I feel like that can be the case when you just like go to like this huge crazy party and like you don't know anyone and you're just wondering why you're there, and like maybe you're not really into that stuff. But then when you have something like a progressive in your house, it's kind of different. It's like, and I just have to say, everyone at Black Elk was just so warm and welcoming. And I just remember like when I toured the house, like people seemed just like kind of more fluid in a sense, and I think that's what really drew me to live at that house. And I guess I realized that to be true throughout like throughout the year and then throughout the summer, and then now like this year started and I got elected House President, which has been a pretty cool experience so far. I think I realized just how much you have to draw upon like different experiences and like facilitation and like being really fair and but also like just being very organized at the same time and just like knowing when to use your judgment to like maybe respond to like certain requests and things people may have both internally like in the house and also like outside organizations that are always looking to get involved or get co-ops involved in like maybe some cause they have or whatnot. So I think we still like try to, you know, maintain a certain level of being active in different causes or like maybe different groups, and like we host the NASCO Institute after party, and you know, people always, I guess, like approach us with different proposals, I guess, to like maybe host an event or
That's what happens when you're like the most organized house, or the most organized person, then you get to do everything.
Yeah.
So what's a progressive? I don't know. Describe it.
So I think, I'm not sure if all the houses do it, but I know like a couple houses do it. Like I know Owen House does it, I think Mish House does it, we do it. It's when you kind of, well, okay, it's like every room kind of has like, okay, you could either have like your, I think there's usually like a theme, like a big theme for like the whole house. It doesn't always have to be that way, but we usually do it with like a theme, and then so the house. Let me think. What did we? I don't know why I don't remember what our theme was last year. I want to say it was like maybe like decades or something, like time, like maybe
each room's a different decade.
Yeah, each room is like a different
okay.
decade or like year or whatever, and then you pick music to play in your room from that decade, and then you like you come up with a drink. Usually it's alcoholic drinks, but it doesn't have to be. And then you have that drink in your room, and then everyone. So you start at, you kind of go in chronological order. You either start at the like room number 1 or whatever the last number is of the room, and then the whole house starts in that room, and you just kind of like dance and like hang out and chill and like have some drinks, and then when everyone is, you kind of like someone initiates, you know, the next like to move on. So after some time, you kind of just go to the next room, and then you just keep doing that until you get to the last room.
We used to call that a progressive drum.
Yeah, it is pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, but you're safe in one house. You're not going from bar to bar. House to
Right,
house. That's
right.
good.
So it's actually really fun. So.
How did the phones work? We used to have like a Morse code system. When you got a phone call.
We did
da,
it
da,
then
da,
too. 60 people with their
I
own
know.
code, right?
How does it work now?
And most
cell phones.
With cell phones.
Yeah.
So there's no landline?
Well, houses, yeah, they have them.
They still have
For
them.
emergencies,
Most
we're gonna have.
most people put them in the closet and disconnect it because they hear it ringing. Like, what's that?
What is that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but if there's a blackout like there was in 03.
But yeah, cell phones
So
are
they
pretty.
still have landlines in each house.
Yes,
right?
there's still
Listed
landlines in
on
each
the
house,
door.
yes.
Yeah, but it's not
But
really. It's
nobody-
not.
Sometimes
Yeah.
you try to call the house.
Let me say, as somebody who tries to call people, it's really nice to be able to do it on a cell phone and get somebody.
Yeah. And not wait 10 minutes for like
Yeah.
da 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 da.
See if they're home. I don't know. I'm very in favor of the current system, in spite
used
of
to
my
have a
nostalgia for
chart
buzzing.
by
It was fun though. I mean, you know.
So and so is this. And
Usually what you did is you tuned in only to your particular
Yeah, your
signal,
ears were-
and then the signals were always going on all the time. And you know, people who weren't familiar with the system were visiting you or something. Like, what is all that? What is all that beeping? It's like,
And
what
sometimes
beeping
you
and buzzing?
knew like
you know?
your friend's code or whatever. Like, oh,
Yeah,
that's
you
for
would learn your friend's code
Yeah.
or somebody else, so you could let them know they had a telephone
Yeah,
call. Yeah.
But yeah, but doesn't your $75
When
But we
the
had
change.
one line for 32 people.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
So there was
Somehow it
one
worked,
phone
though.
number, and I remember rationing out.
But we weren't
talking
all
on the
into
phone.
like yakety yakety yakety.
I think we had
text,
two
text,
phones
text,
over at
text.
Xanadu.
Yeah, with the change, like landlines are normally popular in the houses. Email too is something else we've had to deal with. People who may have not, now we're trying to get members to encourage them to talk to each other if there's a conflict.
Go figure.
But passive aggressive emails,
Oh, no.
yeah, that can be.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed talking to you so much last night.
Say it.
However,
Fritz wanted to say something. What?
Oh,
What's it?
and we had to sign up for a long distance calls, and some people didn't sign up for certain calls, and so we'd have to try to figure out who made each
Oh, to make people pay for the phone calls. And Vale House, or Mish House, one of the houses had like a phone booth room that, or was it the bathroom that was just covered with graffiti? I think it was the bathroom. The little powder room. And it was so cool because you put your graffiti in that room, it's fine. And then some house manager, maintenance person, like painted over it with completely unannounced. And it was like, that Nazi!
well, it's interesting you said that my anthropology professor said something at Berkeley, actually. That was part of, we took, that was in folklore. And it was the writing on the bathroom wall is a very important part of folklore.
Yeah, it was very important. You got out a lot of issues with that graffiti.
Yes, and then it's also associated, oddly enough, with Germany for some reason. I think he always, with a psychoanalytical analysis was that,
Well, the Berlin Wall or something?
Well, no, it kind of related to more anal stages in your development or something, and something having to do with German cleanliness or something.
Oh yeah, it was like a real Nazi move when this dude painted the wall. Completely rewrote history. Erased history.
Do many, like in Black Elk, how many people are in that house? About
22.
So are there sit-down meals still, or is it buffet served and people go to their rooms and eat?
We still have sit-down meals. Yeah, I feel like sometimes people, this doesn't happen very often. Maybe like once in a while people might like choose to eat in their rooms, or like a lot of times people are just busy during dinner time, so we just have safe plates. But I feel like at least every night there's going to be a pretty good like crowd that comes out.
Back in our day, it wasn't like that though. We hung out for like 2 hours. It was European style, drink coffee, crossword puzzles. It was nice. Yeah.
I probably should relate a little bit of history of food in co-ops. It's kind of interesting to me. Some of the older people here will remember that we used to have lunches every day.
Breakfast. We don't have them?
There haven't been any breakfast or lunches for a very long time. And a lot of the dinners are not every night. It depends on the house.
Wow.
But you have to sort of put it in context of the society today and the changes that have happened. And it's not just what obviously comes to mind. Right now, a lot of families are not eating together. And the students that come in don't have the same sense of the importance of shared meals as they used to, until they do it. And I think being in the co-ops actually gives people more of an understanding of what most of the world understands, that there is a need to come face to face and share that meal. It brings people together. But it's difficult in some cases. There are some co-ops around the country that have stopped meals. And I think this is a tragedy. But,
really?
But it's true. And there are some other things that have happened as well. What you're talking about in terms of what happens after dinner. Luther used to talk a lot about this in terms of his span of time. He started before TV.
Yeah.
Right. And he said that the biggest change in eating occurred when TV came into the home.
TV dinners.
So that people would leave the dinner to go watch the news after, or whatever on TV after the dinner, rather than sitting around and singing together.
Yeah, TV
or even
tables
talking
and
about
TV
issues of the day. Instead, the news did the issues of the day for you.
Or fighting about the issues of the day.
Right.
We do have the stories
The news
about
gave us an excuse to shout at each other. I remember that very clearly.
Especially nowadays with Fox.
We had some good stories.
Discussed, though.
Had some good stories back in the 30s and 40s about the communists and the socialists coming to fight each other with fists over dinner. There are a lot of changes that have happened for sociological reasons that reflect what's happening in the society. The amazing thing though is that the co-ops have maintained so many of their operational ways of doing things over that entire period since the last 75 years. The work together, the work holidays, the idea of guff. They're
General unspecified free food.
Free food, right.
There are all kinds of things that really are tremendously important in maintaining the ability of people to see themselves as a group. And work, you know, is one of those examples. If you have a maid doing it all, like they do in some of the fraternities,
Right.
you have a different relationship between the individual members than you do in the co-ops. And I think most people subconsciously or consciously realize that. So to me, it's a miracle that all these things have came.
You know, I remember way back in the day, there was a little story in the Michigan Daily about a girl in a sorority who had an eating disorder. And they kicked her out of the house because her little sorority sisters were like, oh, it's messy. And she's wasting, I don't know if they said, she's wasting food. And I mean, I remember seeing her picture and she looked just like my little sister. And I was just thinking, that's really messed up. You know, I
So
mean, it's good to know that especially what you were talking about, Susan, with the DART thing.
Well, actually,
and helping people who have, like, you know, mental health issues or health issues or disability issues.
I think that, I wouldn't say categorically that the ICC is able to handle all situations of difficult behaviors.
Yeah.
And we still maintain formal processes of referral and expulsion when necessary.
Yeah.
But in fact, about 2 years ago at, I believe it was Linder House, after some effort, a young woman, a young member with an eating disorder was put on referral and then was expelled from the house. But based on that, on her behaviors in the house rather than, you know, on a particular disorder. So sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You know, it just depends on each circumstance. And I'm certainly when the members acted in this case, they didn't do so out of anger, but mostly out of compassion because they were not able to live with that individual anymore.
There probably were a lot of steps prior.
It was actually over a course of 2 years.
Yes, over a course of 2 years. So there was a lot of effort put into it. It wasn't done callously at all.
That's good to know.